The reason I do these podcasts are twofold. Obviously, it helps me to spread the word on Dan Pena's QLA methodology and generate some business for me, which is not a bad thing. But my main focus is to make these actionable in a short period of time so that you can actually take this advice and use it to move faster along your QLA journey and avoid some of the mistakes that previously have been made, some of which made by me. So what I wanted to do was, and I always appreciate when I get emails asking me to look at different subjects for podcasts. And this one came from Conor. He actually asked a series of questions. I think they're really good questions. And so I'm going to go through and answer Conor's questions. And hopefully these will help you as well. So he wrote, Dear Mr. Whipple, some food for thought. Splitting time between lead generation and closing existing deals. I think it's really important to close the existing deals, but I also think it's very important to keep the process working. And a lot of times what you'll find is that people will think they have enough leads. They will stop the lead generation process. And then as those leads materialize or don't materialize, they'll have a gap in what is generating business for them and potentially closing those leads. So I would encourage you to do both, but certainly if you have a lead, there's a time to bring the cow home to milk, as I remember Dan saying once. And so if you have something that's hot, follow that thing through. If that means to the detriment of lead generation, well, so be it. But hopefully you can do both of those at the same time. That's a good question. Second one was when to pull the trigger and instruct your professionals on a deal. Well, one of the things you're going to be doing if you're doing QLA right, and I would encourage you to do that and follow the steps, is you're going to have professionals working on a success-oriented, roll fee, deferred fee basis. And you do not want them to work on deals that are going to crater. You can't guarantee that every deal is going to go through, but it's important to let those professionals know that you have an experienced team that's been there, done that, and that what you're going to do is use that team to vet out the acquisition, look for red flags that you can see, get that acquisition to a letter of intent or memorandum of understanding before you pass it to them so that they don't work on a deal that eventually is going to fail. Now, obviously, a deal can fail, but again, it's important that they realize you've done everything you can to mitigate that risk. How to find out whether the seller is telling the truth. It's a good one. And the reason I laugh is because one of the traits of a con man is derived in the name. Con man comes from confidence man. So they generate confidence. So the best advice here is, again, advice that very, very early on with my relationship with Dan, he's talked about, and he's continued to talk about, investigate before you invest. You will eventually be surprised at what you find. And usually someone who is crooked has a history of being crooked. So if you dig deep enough, you are likely to find red flags in their past. And, continue to ask the hard questions during that process. You will develop a pretty good gut as to whether someone's telling the truth or not, unless they're a highly skilled con man. And then, again, your third party investigation, looking for things in the past, asking those questions. That's the best advice I can give on that, Conor. How to find out if the seller is really motivated. Well, look for the signs. Look for how quickly do they come back to you. Look how they are negotiating with you. You will usually be able to tell and ask them, what's your motivation for selling this business? And they'll oftentimes tell you that. I have said it over and over and over again, never ask, never get, and the same is true with trying to determine if that seller is motivated. And the last one was keeping the board on board. For example, how often to updating them even when nothing is happening, etc. That's a good one, Conor. The importance of updating a board really can't be overstated. High-performance people will lose interest if they don't see progress and they don't see that they're contributing to something and adding value. If you go back and listen to podcast number 23 with Sean, he made a great example of that when he said that his board started to drift away. He then had an acquisition that looked good. Eventually it did close. And during that process, he noted that the board was much more engaged. They were doing more activity with respect to his venture. They got more excited about it. And so they saw progress. So I would say, as a rule of thumb, update your board every couple of weeks. Make sure it's meaningful. Make sure that you show progress. Also ask for their help where you need it in that update. Tell them what you're doing. I would encourage you to have a project timeline, and preferably with people's names. For a timeline, you want a task. You want one responsible person so that somebody doesn't point their finger at the other guy and say, oh, I thought you were doing it. So one responsible person, and then a due date, and then monitor that. And that also gives you the ability to use that document to keep people accountable and make sure that you're hitting those timelines. So it's a great way to do that. But every couple of weeks is probably good. Maybe once a month as you get further down, but I would say in the beginning every couple of weeks. But if there's something that happens that's important, don't be afraid to give an update with respect to that. And there's a lot of ways you can do it. You can do an email update. I've seen people do a short video update of 3 minutes where they use a PowerPoint presentation or a keynote presentation. All of those are good. The most important thing, as I mentioned, make it show progress and ask for help in the areas that you need help. That's what the Dream Team is there for. So those are great questions. I thank you for those questions, Conor. And if you put those into action, I think they will help you get there faster towards your QLA goal.